The atmospheric processor's rhythmic hum had become Elena's lullaby over the past 18 months at New Meridian, a mechanical heartbeat that reminded her she was breathing recycled air on a world 300 light-years from home. She'd grown accustomed to the subtle vibrations that traveled through the habitat module's titanium ceramic walls, the way the quantum field generators created a barely perceptible tingle in the air, even the occasional groaning protest from the settlement's fusion reactor when Kepler 442c's magnetic storms played havoc with their containment fields. What she hadn't grown accustomed to, and what jolted her from dreams of Earth's ocean waves, was the sound of someone knocking on their door at midnight. 3 deliberate raps echoed through the main airlock, each one precisely timed, as if whoever stood outside had been practicing the rhythm. Elena's first coherent thought, still tangled in sleep, was that the automated perimeter sensors would have detected any approaching life forms hours ago. Her second thought, significantly more alarming, was that the nearest human settlement lay 300 kilometers across terrain that would challenge a military reconnaissance team, let alone casual midnight visitors. She rolled from her bunk, bare feet finding the cold deck plating, and padded toward the communication console. The settlement's AI, which James had nicknamed Prometheus despite Elena's protests that naming their systems after mythological fire stealers was asking for trouble, should have awakened the entire crew for any perimeter breach. Instead, the main display showed nothing but the familiar green sweep of the sensor array, painting empty wilderness in all directions. The knocking came again, patient and unhurried, as if the visitors had all the time in the universe. Elena activated the internal comm system, her voice barely above a whisper. "James, you awake?" Static crackled for a moment before James Park's distinctly cheerful voice responded, incongruously bright for someone presumably roused from sleep. "Oh, I'm awake all right. Was just lying here wondering if our door-to-door visitors brought pamphlets about the local religion or maybe some cookies. Please tell me they brought cookies." Despite the circumstances, Elena found herself suppressing a smile. James had an uncanny ability to find humor in situations that would send most people reaching for emergency protocols. During their first week on Kepler 442c, when a malfunction in the atmospheric scrubbers had filled their habitat with the sulfurous smell of the planet's geothermal vents, he'd spent 20 minutes doing a perfect impression of their mission commander's reaction to "Ode to Rotten Eggs," complete with theatrical gagging sounds that had the entire crew laughing despite breathing through emergency filters. "Are you monitoring the sensors?" Elena asked, pulling on her duty uniform with practiced efficiency. "That's the interesting part. According to Prometheus, there's nobody out there. According to my ears, somebody's been practicing their door-knocking technique. Either our sensors have developed a sense of humor, or our visitors are really good at hide-and-seek." Elena felt her stomach tighten. Their perimeter array used quantum entanglement sensors that could detect anything larger than a field mouse within a 50-kilometer radius. The technology was so sensitive it occasionally picked up the settlement's own personnel when they worked in the outer maintenance bays. For something to approach undetected suggested either a catastrophic sensor failure or visitors with access to technology that could fool quantum-based detection systems. The knocking resumed, maintaining its unhurried cadence. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. Elena counted 7 complete cycles before the sound stopped entirely. "I'm suiting up," she announced, moving toward the equipment lockers. "Wake Torres." "Already tried. The captain's comm unit isn't responding, and her door's locked from the inside. Either she's sleeping more soundly than usual, or our mysterious visitors came with friends who are really good at sneaking around inside sealed habitats." The implications of that statement sent adrenaline coursing through Elena's system. Captain Sarah Torres never locked her door, maintained military-precise sleep schedules, and responded to communications within seconds even when awakened from deep sleep. For her to be unreachable suggested either incapacitation or something far worse. Elena sealed her environmental suit and activated the helmet's heads-up display, watching as her vital signs appeared in the corner of her vision. Heart rate elevated but stable, blood pressure slightly high but within acceptable parameters, oxygen levels optimal. The suit's medical sensors painted a picture of controlled anxiety rather than panic, which she took as a positive sign. James, I need you to try raising Torres again while I check the perimeter feeds. Already on it. And Elena? I'm suiting up too. If our midnight visitors turn out to be less friendly than they seem, I'd rather not explain to my mother why I let you answer the door alone. Elena moved to the main sensor console, her gloved fingers dancing across the haptic interface. The quantum sensors showed their normal sweep pattern, painting the surrounding terrain in false-color topographical displays that revealed every boulder, every thermal vent, every stand of the crystalline vegetation that somehow thrived in Kepler 442c's thin atmosphere. But the readings were too clean, too perfect, as if the entire landscape had been frozen in time. She switched to the optical sensors, and her breath caught in her throat. 3 figures stood in the swirling amber mist that rose from the planet's nocturnal geothermal activity, positioned perhaps 20 meters from the main airlock. They appeared remarkably human in silhouette. Tall, graceful, wearing what looked like form-fitting garments that seemed to generate their own subtle luminescence. But even through the distortion of the mist and the settlement's external lighting, Elena could see something different about their profiles, something that made her mind struggle to process what she was observing. James, are you seeing this? Oh, I'm seeing it all right. Question is, what exactly am I seeing? Because either our visitors have really interesting fashion sense, or they're not from around here. And by around here, I mean this galaxy. The figures stood with perfect stillness, as if they were statues carved from living light. They faced the habitat module directly, and Elena had the unsettling impression that they were waiting with infinite patience for the humans inside to make a decision. There was something profoundly non-threatening about their posture, yet Elena's scientific mind raced through dozens of scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. Atmospheric readings, she asked, pulling up the environmental data. Normal across the board. No unusual electromagnetic signatures, no radiation spikes, no exotic particles. Whatever they are, they're not giving off any energy signatures our instruments can detect. Elena zoomed the optical sensors, trying to get a clearer image of their visitors. The enhanced resolution revealed details that made her scientific skepticism war with undeniable visual evidence. The figures were definitely humanoid, definitely female in appearance, but their ears were elongated and pointed, giving them an almost mythical quality that seemed to belong in ancient Earth legends rather than on an alien world. This is either first contact, Elena said slowly, or someone's playing an elaborate practical joke using technology that shouldn't exist. Given that the nearest Hollywood studio is about 300 light-years away, I'm leaning toward first contact. Question is, what's our next move? I mean, there's probably a protocol for this somewhere, but I'm betting it doesn't cover visitors who knock politely and wait for us to answer. Elena found herself caught between scientific curiosity and basic survival instincts. Every xenobiological theory she'd studied suggested that truly alien intelligence would be fundamentally incomprehensible to human minds, yet these beings appeared to understand human customs well enough to announce their presence in a distinctly Earth-like manner. The contradiction suggested either remarkable convergent evolution or access to human cultural knowledge that should have been impossible. The comm system crackled to life with Captain Torres's voice, thick with sleep and confusion. What's the situation out there? My instruments are showing conflicting readings, and I've got 3 missed alerts from the perimeter array. Captain, Elena said, relief flooding through her voice, we have visitors. 3 humanoid figures, origin unknown, currently standing outside our main airlock. They've been knocking for the past 15 minutes. A pause that stretched long enough for Elena to wonder if the communication link had failed again. Visitors. Knocking. At midnight. On a planet where the nearest sentient life should be us. Torres's voice carried the particular tone of someone whose military training was struggling to process information that fell well outside established parameters. Are we talking about actual extraterrestrial contact, Dr. Vasquez? That appears to be the most likely explanation, Captain. Another pause, followed by what sounded suspiciously like Torres muttering something uncomplimentary about the timing of universe-changing events. All right. Emergency protocols are now in effect. James, I need you to establish a communication link with Earth Command immediately. Elena, prepare the isolation chamber in case we need to bring anyone inside for examination. I'll be in the command center in 3 minutes. Elena began the process of activating the isolation chamber, a sealed environment designed for studying potentially hazardous biological samples. The irony that humanity's first contact with alien intelligence might take place in what amounted to a sophisticated quarantine facility wasn't lost on her. As she worked, movement on the external sensors caught her attention. The three figures had begun walking toward the airlock with smooth, measured steps that seemed to glide across the uneven terrain. Their approach was unhurried but purposeful, and Elena realized they had somehow known the humans inside had reached a decision. The implications of that observation sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the habitat's climate control systems. The main habitat module felt smaller with 3 visitors who shouldn't exist sitting around their conference table, sipping coffee that James had insisted was the universal language of hospitality. Elena watched steam rise from their cups while trying to reconcile what her eyes were telling her with everything she thought she knew about biology, physics, and the likelihood of humanoid aliens developing a taste for Earth beverages. So, James said, settling into his chair with the casual air of someone hosting a dinner party rather than humanity's first confirmed extraterrestrial contact, I have to ask the obvious question. Do you actually need to drink that, or are you just being polite? The one who had introduced herself as Lyra smiled, and Elena noted that her dental structure appeared entirely human except for canines that were slightly more pronounced than the norm. We find that sharing food and drink helps establish trust. Your coffee is, surprisingly complex for such a simple preparation. James takes his coffee very seriously, Captain Torres said, her military bearing intact despite the surreal circumstances. He's been experimenting with different brewing techniques using our limited supplies. Last week he tried to create espresso using the atmospheric processor's pressure systems. It worked, James protested. Sort of. If you ignored the metallic aftertaste and the way it made everyone's eyes water. Vera, the second visitor, laughed with a sound that was entirely too human for Elena's comfort. We appreciate innovation. Our people have been known to adapt local resources in creative ways during our travels. Elena leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. Travels. You're implying you visited other worlds, encountered other species. Many worlds, Kaya, the youngest of the 3, said quietly. Her voice carried an accent that seemed to shift subtly between syllables, as if she were speaking multiple languages simultaneously and the universal translator in Elena's mind was working overtime to parse the meaning. Though most encounters end differently than this one. Differently how? Torres asked, her hand unconsciously moving toward the sidearm she wore even during routine station duties. Most species either attack immediately or refuse to acknowledge our presence entirely, Lyra explained. Your response has been refreshingly civilized. James raised his coffee cup in a mock toast. Well, we are known for our stellar first impressions. Just last month, Elena managed to set the atmospheric scrubbers to produce rainbow-colored vapor clouds when the inspection team visited. Very festive. That was an accident, Elena said, though she couldn't suppress a smile at the memory. The quantum resonance chamber was calibrated for standard Earth atmospheric composition, not Kepler, for 42C's trace elements. The effect was quite beautiful, Vera said, and Elena felt a chill as she realized the visitor was describing an event that had occurred inside their sealed habitat, witnessed only by the crew members present. Torres's expression sharpened. How could you know about that incident? Kaya answered before Lyra could respond, her words coming faster than seemed natural. Your quantum experiments create ripples that extend far beyond your immediate awareness. We've been monitoring this settlement since you first activated your consciousness research protocols. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Elena felt her pulse quicken as implications cascaded through her mind. Their quantum consciousness research was classified at the highest levels, theoretical work that pushed the boundaries of both neuroscience and quantum mechanics. For these visitors to know about it suggested either remarkable intelligence-gathering capabilities or something far more unsettling. Consciousness research, Torres repeated slowly. That's not exactly public information. We mean no intrusion, Lyra said, raising her hands in what appeared to be a universal gesture of peaceful intent. But your work has been broadcasting a very specific quantum signature. One that indicates the presence of individuals with unusual neural architectures. Elena's coffee cup slipped from suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting the table with a ceramic clink that seemed unnaturally loud in the sudden silence. You're talking about quantum consciousness theory. The idea that certain minds can maintain coherent thought patterns across multiple probability states. Not theory, Vera said gently. Reality. And you, Dr. Vasquez, possess one of the most powerful quantum consciousness matrices we've encountered. James looked between Elena and their visitors with an expression of growing bewilderment. Okay, I'm usually pretty good at following along with Elena's science talks, but you've officially left me behind. Are we talking about psychic powers? Because I have to say, if Elena's been holding out on telepathic abilities, I'm going to be deeply hurt that she never told me what I was really thinking during our poker games. It's not telepathy, Elena said, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Quantum consciousness theory suggests that certain individuals can maintain awareness across multiple quantum states simultaneously. Instead of collapsing into a single timeline like normal consciousness, they can exist in superposition. Like Schrödinger's cat, James said, but with people. And presumably less chance of being found dead in a box. The analogy is crude but essentially accurate, Kaya said. Such individuals can perceive probability cascades, influence quantum outcomes through observation, and in extreme cases, maintain coherent identity across parallel reality branches. Torres set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. And you're saying Dr. Vasquez has these abilities? Latent, but remarkably powerful, Lyra confirmed. Your quantum research has been slowly activating dormant neural pathways. We estimate she's perhaps 6 months away from spontaneous manifestation. Elena felt the room spinning slightly, as if reality itself had become unstable. That's impossible. The brain can't function in quantum superposition. Decoherence would destroy neural cohesion within microseconds. Under normal circumstances, yes, Vera agreed. But certain genetic variations create neural structures that can maintain quantum coherence for extended periods. These variations appear randomly across different species, perhaps once in every 100 million individuals. So Elena's basically won the cosmic lottery, James said, though his usual humor was strained. Lucky her. I'm guessing this isn't the kind of prize that comes with a nice vacation and a tax bill. The abilities come with significant risks, Lyra admitted. Uncontrolled manifestation can lead to consciousness fragmentation, temporal displacement, or complete dissolution across infinite probability states. Elena found herself laughing, a sound that bordered on hysteria. Wonderful. So I'm either going insane or becoming some kind of quantum superhero. Is there a third option? Training, Kaya said simply. We can teach you to control the abilities, to use them safely. In exchange for what? Torres asked, her military suspicions in full operation. The three visitors exchanged glances that lasted perhaps a second too long, and Elena had the distinct impression they were communicating in ways that had nothing to do with spoken language. There's something coming, Lyra said finally. A threat that conventional physics cannot address. We need individuals with quantum consciousness to help us stop it. James raised his hand like a student in class. Quick question about this threat. Are we talking asteroid, alien invasion, or something more along the lines of cosmic horror that will make me regret every science fiction movie I've ever watched? The third option, Vera said grimly. We call it the silence. It's an expanding region of space where causality has ceased to function. Anything caught within its boundaries doesn't just die, it ceases to have ever existed. Elena felt her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. You're describing a breakdown in the fundamental structure of spacetime itself. Caused by an ancient war between civilizations that achieved technology capable of rewriting physical laws, Kaya explained. When their conflict reached its climax, reality couldn't contain the contradictions they had created. And it's heading toward Earth, Lyra added quietly. The silence that followed was broken only by the atmospheric processor's steady hum, a sound that had seemed comforting moments ago but now felt like a countdown timer marking humanity's remaining time. James was the first to speak, his voice carrying a forced lightness that didn't quite mask his underlying fear. So, to summarize, Elena's developing reality-bending superpowers, there's a cosmic horror eating the universe, and it's coming for Earth. Did I miss anything important? The timeline, Torres said grimly. How long do we have? Approximately 18 months before the silence reaches your solar system, Vera replied. Elena stared at her coffee cup, watching the liquid surface vibrate with tiny tremors from the habitat's mechanical systems. 18 months to save humanity from a threat that challenged the very foundations of physics. 18 months to master abilities she wasn't sure she wanted to possess. Well, she said finally, at least it's not boring. The settlement's main display screen flickered to life as Kaya pressed her palm against its surface, her elongated fingers spreading in a pattern that somehow interfaced directly with their quantum processors. Elena watched in fascination as lines of code she didn't recognize scrolled past at impossible speeds, the alien symbols rearranging themselves into familiar human mathematical notation as if the computer was learning to translate in real time. Your security protocols are quite sophisticated, Kaya said, her eyes never leaving the screen as data streams cascaded around her hand. Though I notice someone has been using the navigation computer to calculate optimal coffee brewing temperatures. James coughed and looked anywhere but at Captain Torres. In my defense, the thermal regulation algorithms are surprisingly applicable to beverage preparation. It's all about heat distribution and molecular extraction rates. James, Torres said with the weary tone of someone who had given up being surprised by her crew's creative interpretations of equipment usage, please tell me you haven't been running unauthorized experiments on our life support systems. Define unauthorized. Elena found herself grateful for the familiar banter as Kaya's interface with their computer systems reached deeper levels. The casual way the young visitor manipulated their most advanced technology suggested capabilities that made Elena's stomach clench with a mixture of awe and apprehension. When Kaya's fingers began to glow with the same subtle luminescence as her clothing, Elena decided she needed to focus on something other than the fundamental impossibilities unfolding before her eyes. This visualization you're creating, Elena said, gesturing toward the holographic projection that was materializing above the conference table, it's showing the silence's expansion pattern across local stellar regions. The projection resembled a three-dimensional map of nearby star systems, but with dark voids spreading like infection through the familiar constellation patterns. Elena recognized the Sol system's position near the edge of what appeared to be an advancing wave of absolute nothingness. Each dark region represents a volume of space where physical laws have become inconsistent, Lyra explained, manipulating the hologram with gestures that caused entire star clusters to rotate and zoom. Matter, energy, even the quantum vacuum itself becomes unstable. Eventually, the contradictions reach a critical threshold and the entire region simply ceases to exist in any meaningful sense. Vera pointed to a cluster of dim points scattered throughout the projection. These represent worlds where we've encountered quantum-conscious individuals. Most civilizations produce perhaps a dozen such individuals across their entire history. Your species appears to be generating them at an unprecedented rate. Lucky us, James muttered. We're overachievers in the category of cosmic weirdness. Should I add that to our species' resume under special skills? Torres leaned forward, studying the tactical implications of the display. You're saying humans have some kind of natural resistance to this phenomenon? Not resistance, Kaya corrected, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in Elena's skull. Quantum consciousness allows individuals to exist in multiple probability states simultaneously. When reality becomes inconsistent, they can navigate between stable configurations, potentially finding paths through the chaos. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the habitat's climate systems. You're talking about using people as living navigation systems through regions where physics has broken down. The process is more complex than that, Lyra said, though her tone suggested Elena's interpretation wasn't entirely wrong. Quantum-conscious individuals can serve as anchor points for stable reality. They can hold contradictory possibilities in mental superposition without collapsing the wave function, essentially creating pockets of consistent spacetime. Pockets big enough for what? Torres asked with military directness. Evacuation ships carrying millions of refugees, Vera replied quietly. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. They weren't talking about saving Earth. They were talking about saving whoever could be loaded onto spacecraft before the planet itself was consumed by expanding nothingness. The scope of the catastrophe made her previous concerns about quantum consciousness abilities seem almost trivial. James broke the stunned silence with his characteristic ability to find humor in impossible situations. So we're basically being recruited as cosmic lifeguards for the universe's most dangerous swimming pool. Do we get those little red shorts and whistles? The uniforms are optional, Kaya said with what Elena was learning to recognize as alien humor, but the training is extensive. And dangerous. Elena found her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Dangerous how? What happens if the training goes wrong? Consciousness fragmentation, Lyra explained with clinical detachment. The mind splits across multiple probability branches and loses coherent identity. The individual becomes aware of every possible version of themselves simultaneously, unable to distinguish between past, present, and future states. That sounds like a particularly creative form of insanity, Torres observed. It is, Vera confirmed. Though some subjects maintain enough residual awareness to serve as early warning systems for reality instabilities. We call them oracles. James raised his hand again. Follow-up question, exactly how many of these training accidents are we talking about? Because if the failure rate is anything like Elena's cooking experiments, we might want to consider alternative career paths. My cooking isn't that bad, Elena protested, though she remembered the incident with the protein synthesizer that had produced something resembling purple foam instead of the requested chicken substitute. Elena, you managed to create a substance that our atmospheric scrubbers registered as a potential biological hazard. I'm pretty sure that violates several laws of thermodynamics. Kaya's laugh was surprisingly human, though it carried undertones that seemed to echo from directions Elena couldn't identify. The failure rate for training is approximately 30%. However, the alternative is certain extinction for your entire species. Those are actually better odds than I expected, Torres said grimly. What's our timeline for making this decision? The holographic display shifted, zooming in on Earth's solar system and revealing a complex orbital pattern of approaching objects. Elena counted at least 24 points of light moving on trajectories that would bring them to Earth within the next few weeks. Earth Defense Corps ships, Elena realized. They're coming here. Your government has been tracking our movements for some time, Lyra confirmed. They're aware that something unusual is happening, though they don't yet understand the true nature of the threat. Torres stood abruptly, her military training asserting itself. How long before they arrive? Approximately 72 hours, Vera replied. They'll demand our surrender and attempt to contain what they perceive as an alien threat. Elena felt the weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. In 3 days, Earth's military forces would arrive expecting to deal with a standard first contact scenario. Instead, they would find refugees from a cosmic catastrophe bearing news that human civilization had 18 months to prepare for extinction-level reality breakdown. They won't believe you, she said quietly. The scope of what you're describing is too large, too unprecedented. Earth's governments will assume this is either an invasion attempt or elaborate deception. Which is why we need to complete your initial training before they arrive, Kaya said, her fingers still dancing through the computer interface. Once you can demonstrate quantum consciousness abilities, the physical evidence will be undeniable. James looked between Elena and their visitors with growing alarm. Wait, you're talking about putting Elena through this consciousness expansion process in the next 3 days? Didn't you just say the failure rate was 30%? Under ideal conditions with months of preparation, Lyra clarified. Accelerated training carries significantly higher risks. Elena found herself calculating probabilities with the dispassionate analysis that had carried her through years of dangerous research. The numbers were stark. Certain extinction for humanity versus a 60% chance of personal survival through a process that could either grant her abilities beyond current human understanding or fragment her consciousness across infinite realities. What would I need to do? She asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Torres grabbed Elena's shoulder with enough force to spin her around. Dr. Vasquez, you are not seriously considering volunteering for an experimental procedure that has a 40% chance of driving you insane. She's considering it because she understands the mathematics, Vera said gently. Individual sacrifice weighed against species survival. Plus, James added with forced cheerfulness, if Elena develops reality-bending superpowers, maybe she can finally fix the coffee maker that's been making that weird clicking sound for the past 6 months. Elena looked around the table at faces that had become family during 18 months of isolation on an alien world. Torres with her protective military instincts, James with his ability to find humor in the darkest moments, and 3 visitors who claimed to represent humanity's only hope for survival in a universe where causality itself was breaking down. If I do this, Elena said slowly, and something goes wrong, I need you to promise me you'll continue working with them. Find other quantum-conscious individuals, help them prepare, do whatever it takes to save as many people as possible. Elena, James said quietly, his usual humor absent, you're talking like this is a suicide mission. Maybe it is, she replied. But if we do nothing, it's a suicide mission for everyone. The holographic display shifted again, showing the expanding wave of the silence creeping steadily toward familiar star patterns. Elena stared at the representation of Earth, a tiny blue dot in the path of approaching nothingness, and realized that her choice had been made the moment she understood the true scope of the threat. When do we start? She asked. The quantum consciousness expansion chamber hummed with energies that made Elena's teeth ache, though she couldn't tell if the sensation was real or a side effect of existing in 17 different probability states simultaneously. James sat at the monitoring station, his fingers dancing across haptic controls while he maintained what he'd dubbed his quantum anchor protocols, a connection that would theoretically guide her back to their primary timeline if her consciousness scattered too far across the multiverse. You know, James said, his voice reaching her through the strange acoustic distortions created by overlapping realities, when I signed up for this mission, I thought the most dangerous thing I'd encounter would be Elena's cooking experiments. This is significantly more terrifying. Elena found herself laughing from multiple throats in multiple timelines, the sound creating harmonic resonances that made the chamber's crystalline walls vibrate in patterns that spelled out mathematical equations in languages that hadn't been invented yet. At least if this goes wrong, you won't have to worry about my cooking anymore. Don't even joke about that, Torres said from her position at the tactical console, where she was monitoring the approaching Earth Defense Corps fleet. If you fragment your consciousness across infinite realities, who's going to help me explain to Command why our first contact mission turned into a cosmic recruitment drive for reality-bending superhumans? Through the chamber's transparent aluminum walls, Elena could see Lyra, Vera, and Kaya working in perfect synchronization to maintain the quantum field generators. Their movements seemed choreographed, as if they were performing a dance that existed in dimensions her normal consciousness couldn't perceive. Now, with her awareness expanded across multiple probability branches, she could see the elegant complexity of their coordination, each gesture influencing quantum potentials, each breath stabilizing reality fluctuations that would otherwise tear the chamber apart. EDF ships are entering the outer system, Torres announced, her military training keeping her voice steady despite the unprecedented circumstances. 12 heavy cruisers, for dreadnoughts, and what looks like a prototype reality manipulation vessel I didn't know existed. That would be the theoretical quantum warfare platform, Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics from several timelines where she'd read classified research papers that hadn't been written yet. They've been developing it based on fragments of alien technology recovered from. She paused, processing information that belonged to futures that might never happen. From previous contact events they haven't told the public about. James looked up from his monitoring duties with the expression of someone whose worldview was undergoing rapid revision. Previous contact events. Plural. Are you telling me this isn't humanity's first encounter with aliens? Not exactly, Kaya said, her attention still focused on the quantum field calibrations. Your government has encountered 17 different refugee groups over the past 50 years. Most were fleeing the same phenomenon we are. And they kept it secret because. Torres began. Because panic would have accomplished nothing useful, Vera replied. The previous refugee groups carried warnings about threats too distant to address with available technology. Your species needed time to develop quantum consciousness capabilities naturally. Elena felt her awareness shifting as the expansion process reached a critical threshold. She could perceive the approaching fleet not just as points of light on a tactical display, but as probability cascades extending across multiple timelines. In some realities, the ships opened fire immediately upon arrival. In others, they established communication and began negotiations that lasted weeks. In a few disturbing branches, they deployed weapons that unmade entire sections of spacetime, creating miniature versions of the silence around New Meridian. The fleet commander is Admiral Chen, she announced, pulling the information from a timeline where the tactical data had already been transmitted. She's been briefed on quantum consciousness theory but believes it's a psychological warfare technique rather than a genuine phenomenon. How could you possibly know that? Torres demanded. Because I'm watching her receive the briefing right now, Elena replied, her consciousness existing simultaneously in the present moment and in the fleet's command center 3 hours ago. Time becomes remarkably fluid when you're not locked into a single probability state. James's monitoring equipment began emitting warning tones as Elena's consciousness expanded beyond the chamber's designed parameters. Elena, I'm reading quantum cascade fluctuations. You're spreading across too many timeline branches simultaneously. I can handle it, she said, though part of her wasn't entirely certain which timeline was speaking. I can see the solution paths now. There are exactly 43 stable configurations that result in successful evacuation protocols for Earth. 43 out of how many total possibilities? Lyra asked with professional interest. Approximately 800 million, Elena replied, her consciousness automatically calculating probability matrices across infinite potential futures. Though the number increases to nearly 2,000 if we can convince Admiral Chen that quantum consciousness abilities are real rather than elaborate performance art. I vote for option 2, James said, frantically adjusting the anchor protocols as Elena's consciousness threatened to drift beyond recovery range. How exactly do we convince a military officer that reality manipulation is a genuine scientific phenomenon? Elena smiled from 17 different faces across 17 different timelines, the expression creating interference patterns in the quantum field. Simple. We show her. The chamber's energy output spiked as Elena focused her expanding awareness on a single, specific task. In the approaching fleet, aboard the command vessel UES Determination, Admiral Chen was reviewing tactical assessments when her coffee cup began floating 6 inches above her desk, rotating slowly while maintaining perfect temperature stability. Elena, Torres said with the tone of someone watching her subordinate perform cosmic-level mischief, please tell me you're not using reality-bending powers to levitate the Admiral's coffee. It's a harmless demonstration, Elena replied, simultaneously existing in the chamber and in the Admiral's quarters, where she was carefully ensuring the coffee remained at exactly the temperature Chen preferred. Plus, it establishes that our abilities are real without threatening anyone. James burst into laughter despite the situation's gravity. You're establishing first contact protocols through beverage-based reality manipulation. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Why not both? Elena asked, her consciousness now stable across multiple probability branches but anchored firmly to their primary timeline by James's quantum protocols. Admiral Chen is currently staring at her floating coffee cup and running through approximately 47 different explanations for the phenomenon. In 12 minutes, she'll conclude that contact with an advanced intelligence is the most likely scenario. And then? Torres asked. Then she'll request permission to open communication channels with New Meridian instead of implementing containment protocols, Elena replied, gently returning the Admiral's coffee to its desk across millions of kilometers of space. Which gives us the opportunity to explain the situation before anyone starts shooting. Vera looked up from the quantum field generators with what Elena was learning to recognize as alien approval. Your grasp of quantum consciousness applications is remarkably intuitive for someone who achieved expansion less than an hour ago. I have good teachers, Elena said, and excellent friends providing anchoring support. The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission from the approaching fleet. Torres activated the receiver, and Admiral Chen's voice filled the chamber with professional calm that didn't quite mask her underlying confusion. New Meridian Station, this is Admiral Chen aboard UES Determination. We're receiving reports of unusual electromagnetic phenomena in your vicinity. Are you experiencing any technical difficulties that might explain unusual behavior in quantum-sensitive equipment? Elena gestured for Torres to open the channel. Admiral Chen, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez, xenobiological specialist at New Meridian. We're not experiencing technical difficulties, but we do have urgent information regarding a threat to Earth that requires immediate attention. Dr. Vasquez, our instruments indicate the presence of unregistered vessels in your area. Can you confirm your status? We have 3 visitors from an advanced civilization, Admiral. They've brought warning about a phenomenon called the silence that threatens Earth within the next 18 months. We need to establish formal contact protocols and begin immediate evacuation planning. The silence that followed was long enough for Elena to observe several probability branches where Admiral Chen ended the communication and ordered weapons deployment. Fortunately, they were following the timeline where her floating coffee demonstration had adequately prepared her for impossible revelations. Dr. Vasquez, are you telling me we're dealing with genuine extraterrestrial contact? Yes, Admiral. And they're here to help us survive something that makes traditional military threats look like minor inconveniences. James leaned toward the communication pickup. Admiral, this is Specialist Park. I can confirm that Dr. Vasquez has not been replaced by aliens, brainwashed, or subjected to any form of mind control. She's just developed the ability to manipulate quantum probability states across multiple timelines, which is apparently a normal evolutionary development for humans facing cosmic-level extinction events. That's remarkably specific, Specialist Park. We've had an interesting few days, Admiral. Elena felt her consciousness settling into a stable configuration that allowed her to exist primarily in their timeline while maintaining awareness of the probability cascades that determined humanity's survival chances. The sensation was like learning to see with new eyes, perceiving not just what was happening but what could happen with the right choices and careful application of quantum consciousness abilities. Admiral Chen, Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple probability states, I can see the decision trees extending from this moment. If we work together, human governments, quantum-conscious individuals, and our alien allies, we can save approximately 60% of Earth's population. The evacuation ships are already being prepared in timeline branches where we succeed. But we need to start immediately. 60%, Chen repeated quietly. What happens to the other 40%? They become part of the silence, Lyra said gently, her voice joining the communication link. Along with Earth itself. But their sacrifice will ensure that human consciousness survives to rebuild among the stars. Torres stood at attention despite the surreal circumstances. Admiral, I recommend we implement first contact protocols and begin immediate coordination with our visitors. The threat they've described is beyond our current defensive capabilities. Agreed, Chen replied after a moment that stretched across several probability timelines. New Meridian, we're establishing orbital approach patterns. Prepare to receive a diplomatic team within 6 hours. Elena felt herself smiling across multiple realities simultaneously, the expression creating probability waves that increased humanity's survival chances by measurable fractions. "Admiral, I should mention that we'll have coffee ready. James has become quite skilled at brewing techniques that work across multiple timeline configurations." "I'm not even going to ask what that means," Chen said with the weary tone of someone whose worldview had fundamentally shifted in the span of 10 minutes. As the communication ended, Elena looked around the chamber at faces that had become family during humanity's most crucial transition. James with his quantum anchor protocols that had saved her consciousness from infinite fragmentation. Torres with her military precision adapted to impossible circumstances. Lyra, Vera, and Kaya with their patient guidance through evolutionary developments that should have taken millennia. "So," James said, powering down the monitoring equipment, "what happens now? Do we save the world, join the galactic community, and learn to make coffee that exists in 17 dimensions simultaneously?" Elena laughed, the sound creating harmonic resonances that stabilized reality fluctuations throughout the chamber. "Now we do the hard work of teaching other quantum-conscious humans to control their abilities, coordinating with Earth's governments to build evacuation ships, and learning to exist as something more than human while remaining essentially ourselves." "And if we succeed?" Torres asked. "If we succeed," Elena replied, her consciousness touching probability branches where human colonies flourished among distant stars, "we become the species that survived the impossible and learned to navigate chaos itself. We become the ones who help others do the same." Outside the chamber's windows, the first Earth Defense Corps ships appeared as points of light against Kepler 442c's alien sky, carrying humanity's future toward a rendezvous with transformed possibilities and the strange, wonderful responsibility of consciousness that could exist in 17 places at once while never forgetting the simple pleasure of sharing coffee with friends who had become family among the stars.